taken the concept of hacking, I guess, and sort of, I don't know if you've redefined it. I mean, I think many people sort of perceive hacking as to be to be perceived as sort of like someone, an outlaw, if you will, breaking into systems. But in some ways, you've decided to provide this as a conceptual framework for really where power comes from in our society and who is doing the hacking.
And I'm going back to a more original definition of hacking. You're right, hacking we think of now as criminal, but the term really is a clever way of getting something done. We're not breaking the rules, we're subverting them. We hacked it together. A hack as getting the computer to do something that it might not have been supposed to do, but the code says you can do it. So that's really the flavor I'm trying to get at. Yeah, hacks can be illegal and hacking can be illegal, but doesn't have to be, right? That's a legal system imposed on top of the set of rules. So I'm thinking of it as a loophole, as a way to follow the rules but subvert their intent. So if you hacking into a computer system, you're following the rules of the software, but you're doing something that the programmers didn't anticipate. You found a vulnerability, an exploit, a loophole. If you hack the tax system, you're finding a way to not cheat on taxes. Taxes are legal, but a loophole, something that wasn't intended, a trick, a way to save money that subverts the system in some way, but is allowed by the letter of the rules. So that's the flavor I'm going for. So think of the filibuster, right? A hack from ancient Rome. Cato the Elder looks around and says, the rules say we have to conduct business by sundown. So if I never stop talking, we can't get anything done, right? So he's looking at the rules and using them in a way they weren't anticipated. That's the flavor I like.
It's interesting as you raise that because many years ago, I heard a story. I was in Australia and they were talking about these 4-day test matches in cricket. And I don't really understand the game, but they one of the pitchers decided like, oh, well, we're going to run out of time, which was not typical in cricket. Cricket would just go on and finish when it finishes as opposed to like a time. And so he started to roll the ball, making it almost impossible for the hitter to hit. And apparently, oddly enough, the fans, oddly from an American standpoint, but maybe not so much from an Australian one, the fans started booing their own team because they're like, you're not playing the game in the way that it's meant to. What are the safeguards for the abuse? I mean, you bring up the filibuster. What are the safeguards for that in the context of a hack?
Well, let's use your cricket example. So, look what happened. I'm sure the rules were silent on whether you're allowed to roll the ball or not. So you pick up the rule book and it doesn't say you got to actually throw the pitch. You can't roll the ball in an effort to delay time and win when you're already ahead, right? It's against the spirit of the game. And the fans recognize that. It was against the spirit of the game, even though the rules permitted it. And what probably happened, I don't know if this is true, but happens a lot in sports, is that whoever is in charge of cricket on this planet took the rule book and edited it. So an example I use in my book, a team shows up in the 1970s on the Formula One racetrack with a 6-wheeled car. And everyone says, just like that cricket match, you can't have a 6-wheeled car. They pull out the rule book and say, show me. And the rules were silent on the number of cars, the number of wheels a car could have. And what happened was that the standards body in charge of Formula One racing, they have a French name, I forget who they are, changed the rules. So now you look in the rule book, you can't have no more than or no less than, in case you are also wondering, 4 wheels. Now there's another cricket hack that is still being done. Someone a few years ago realized you could hit the ball behind you. You can't do this in baseball, you can do it in cricket. I also don't know the rules of cricket, but supposedly it is a thing. The rules didn't prohibit it, but no one thought of it before. Never occurred to anybody. Someone does it, and now it's part of the game. So here's what happens in a hack. Whoever's in charge gets to decide, is it in the spirit of the game or not? Should we allow it or not? In cricket, it's whoever that organizational body is. For the U.S. Senate, it's whoever makes the rules of the Senate. For a lot of things, it's the court system. If it's a vulnerability in Microsoft, the Microsoft company gets to decide whether they patch the rules.
I mean, it's interesting. It brings up the dilemma. Maybe we can talk about this in a bit, though. There is a governing body for cricket. We have at least some transparency as to why somebody doesn't fix maybe the filibuster rules in the Senate. I mean, but the real problem, it seems to me, comes when these hacks are not necessarily as transparent to the broader society, and that the powers that would fix these hacks to the benefit of society are captured by the same people who are performing the hacks.
And that's where power comes in. And this book is really about power. So let's take some tax loopholes as an example of that. So a tax loophole is kind of a mistake in the tax code. We write the tax code, it's complicated, and we made a mistake, and someone clever found if you could put these rules together, you can avoid taxes. The carried interest loophole is an example, or the double Dutch Irish sandwich that companies like Apple and Google use to evade U.S. taxes for, I think, years, if not decades.
Yes.
Right. So these are mistakes, and they can be fixed.
Well, they are features or bugs that don't align with the stated goals associated with what they're doing. I mean, I wonder if the carried loophole is a mistake in the sense that the people who put that in there, I have a feeling, know exactly what they were doing.
So let's leave that aside for now. Let's assume that was an error. Certainly the double Dutch Irish sandwich, integrating the laws of US, Netherlands, Ireland, and an offshore tax haven, that was an emergent property. That was a mistake.
Right. Unanticipated. Right.
Right. Unanticipated, unintended. They appear, they're used. And you're right. A tax loophole, even the carried interest loophole, no one announces that they're using it. Right. We find out about it slowly. And some of these loopholes can be closed by the IRS. Some are so big they require Congress to close them. And that's where power gets in. But we've been trying for 20 years to close the carried interest loophole. We've been unable to because of lobbying, because the money that is making money from this loophole is also paying politicians to keep it open. So, right. So there's no money who is going to ensure that the rules of cricket allow for the rolling of the ball, or the rules of Formula One racing allow for a six-wheel car. But there is going to be money to fight for whatever loopholes Uber is using so they don't have to classify their workforce as employees, or whatever loopholes rich people are using to evade taxes, or whatever loopholes that hedge funds are using these days. And hedge funds are full of loopholes. Right? I mean, hacking is what they do. So yes, power matters a lot here, because power can go up a level and do their best to ensure that their hacks remain legal, whereas the hacks that you and I might use, regular people might use, get closed. And I remember an example. This was after Trump's tax cuts. He limited the amount of money you can save in your taxes on state and local taxes. So here was the hack. We all learned, you prepay your taxes for next year, this year, right? You've paid the tax this year. You take the deduction this year because you won't get it next year. That was the hack. And pretty quickly, the IRS said, no, it's not going to work. Don't do that. We're not going to accept that.
Right.
And there wasn't really a lobbying interest to keep it open. And that's a hack that was quickly closed by the IRS. Hacks that the wealthy and powerful use are much more likely to stay open.